In the sprawling expanse of Chicago O'Hare International Airport, where dreams take flight and destinies intersect, Mike Collins works miracles with machines others have given up on. As a single father juggling late-night shifts and his daughter's college dreams, he's made peace with life's modest offerings. But fate has other plans. When a sleek private jet breaks down on the rain-slicked tarmac, Mike answers the call that will change everything. Armed with nothing but his toolbox and 30 years of experience, he faces a problem that has stumped the airport's best mechanics. Little does he know, the quiet woman watching him work isn't just another passenger. She's Sarah Matthews, owner of the largest airline fleet in North America. Could this chance encounter on a stormy Chicago night rewrite two life stories that were never meant to cross paths? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The pre-dawn chill of Chicago's autumn wrapped around Mike Collins as he made his way across the employee parking lot of O'Hare International. His steel-toed boots, worn but meticulously maintained like everything else in his life, clicked against the concrete in a familiar rhythm. 23 years of morning shifts had taught him every crack in this path, every security guard's name, every subtle change in the airport's morning breath. At his locker, Mike's calloused fingers traced the edges of the photo tucked into the metal door. Karen's smile frozen in time, their daughter Emma barely reaching his knee. The picture was creased at the corners now, edges softened by years of gentle touches. Karen would have been proud of Emma, now 17 and dreaming of medical school. The acceptance letter from Northwestern had arrived yesterday. A bittersweet victory that kept Mike awake most of the night. "Morning, Collins," Jerry's voice echoed through the maintenance bay. The younger mechanic was already knee-deep in paperwork, coffee cup perpetually glued to his hand. "Got that 747 from United waiting on Bay 4. Something about the landing gear sensors acting up again." Mike nodded, already reaching for his toolbox. "Those new digital systems," he said, shaking his head. "Sometimes the old ways are better." His own toolbox was a testament to that philosophy, handed down from his father, each tool cleaned daily, handles worn smooth by 3 generations of working hands. The morning unfolded like countless others before it. Mike moved from aircraft to aircraft, his expertise sought after by pilots and fellow mechanics alike. He didn't mind being the go-to guy. It meant job security, and every extra hour meant another dollar toward Emma's tuition. The acceptance letter's numbers kept flashing in his mind, $56,000 per year. His savings would cover maybe 1 semester, and even with scholarships. "Dad!" Emma's voice cut through his thoughts. She stood in the maintenance bay doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder, holding up a paper bag. "You forgot your lunch again." Mike wiped his hands on his coveralls, a smile breaking through his worried expression. Emma looked more like Karen every day, same determined chin, same way of tilting her head when she was about to say something important. "You didn't have to drive all the way out here, sweetheart, and let you survive on vending machine crackers again." She handed him the bag, then lowered her voice. "I saw the tuition notice in the mail. We need to talk about it." "Nothing to talk about," Mike said firmly but gently. "We'll figure it out. We always do." Emma's eyes, sharp and knowing like her mother's, studied his face. "I could defer a year. Work at Aunt Sarah's restaurant, not happening." Mike's tone left no room for argument. "Your mother and I always said education comes first. I've got some savings, and there's still time to apply for more scholarships." A call came over the radio, another mechanical issue needing his attention. Emma recognized the look on her father's face, the one that meant their conversation would have to wait. She hugged him quickly, the scent of motor oil and metal familiar and comforting. "Love you, Dad. Don't work too late." Mike watched her go, pride and worry wrestling in his chest. His daughter was brilliant, determined, everything he and Karen had hoped she'd be. The photo in his locker seemed to weigh heavier now, Karen's frozen smile both encouraging and challenging him to find a way. He turned back to his work, hands steady despite his churning thoughts. The day stretched ahead, full of machines he could fix, problems he could solve. If only life's bigger challenges could be handled with a wrench and 30 years of experience. But for now, he had aircrafts waiting, and tomorrow would bring what it would bring. Jerry appeared at his elbow, another work order in hand. "You okay, Mike? You've been staring at that engine for 5 minutes." "Never better," Mike replied, reaching for his tools. Just thinking about how sometimes the biggest repairs aren't the ones you can see right in front of you. The younger mechanic nodded, though Mike knew he didn't fully understand. That was okay. Some lessons could only come with time, with watching your child grow up, with facing the gap between dreams and reality. Mike had learned them all, one shift at a time, one repair at a time, one day at a time. The airport hummed around him, a constant reminder of possibilities taking flight. Somewhere in the distance, a jet engine roared to life, and Mike Collins went back to work, his toolbox open and ready, waiting for whatever challenge the day might bring next. The afternoon sky darkened prematurely as storm clouds gathered over O'Hare, bringing with them the kind of humid tension that made experienced pilots check their weather radar twice. Mike was finishing up his inspection of a commercial airliner when his radio crackled to life. "Collins, you copy?" It was Martinez from Air Traffic Control, his usually steady voice carrying an edge. "We've got a situation on Tarmac C, private jet refusing clearance for takeoff. Some kind of mechanical issue they can't identify. Their mechanics stuck in Detroit." Mike closed his toolbox, already moving. "What kind of aircraft?" "Gulfstream G650. Pilots reporting unusual vibrations in the port engine and some readings he doesn't like. Already had 2 mechanics look at it, but—" Martinez paused. "They're specifically requesting you, Mike. Apparently, Jerry mentioned your name." Rain began to fall as Mike made his way across the tarmac, each drop hitting the concrete with increasing urgency. The Gulfstream sat alone in the growing darkness, its sleek silhouette a study in elegant engineering. Even at rest, it spoke of privilege and power, the kind of aircraft that carried CEOs and celebrities, people whose worlds rarely intersected with mechanics in worn coveralls. The pilot met him at the stairs, a tall man with silver temples and concerned eyes. "Mr. Collins? Thank God. We've got a full inspection due in Singapore in 48 hours, and our passenger—" He glanced back into the cabin. "Well, let's just say this delay is particularly inconvenient." Mike nodded, already focused on the port engine. He could feel it, even before touching the metal. Something wasn't right. The vibration the pilot reported wasn't just in the engine. It had a harmonic quality that spoke of deeper issues. "How long has it been making that sound?" "What sound? It's not running." "Exactly." Mike pressed his palm against the engine housing. "But it's still resonating, like a tuning fork that nobody struck." He opened his toolbox, selecting instruments with the precision of a surgeon. "Mind if I take a look inside?" The access panel revealed a maze of components, each telling its own story to Mike's experienced eyes. Modern jets were marvels of technology, but they still followed the basic laws of physics, laws Mike had learned through decades of hands-on experience. He spotted the issue almost immediately, though it took another moment to believe what he was seeing. "Well, that's a new one," he muttered, reaching deeper into the engine compartment. A custom modification, clearly aftermarket, had been installed to improve fuel efficiency. Brilliant engineering, except for one small detail. It hadn't accounted for the specific resonance frequencies of this engine type. Through the rain, he was vaguely aware of movement behind him. A woman had emerged from the cabin, standing just inside the shelter of the wing. She said nothing, but Mike could feel her watching his every move. There was something different about her presence. Not the usual impatient energy of delayed executives, but rather a focused curiosity. "Found your problem," Mike announced, carefully extracting a component that gleamed with expensive precision. "This modification is top-quality work, but it's creating a harmonic resonance in your port engine. Give it another hour of flight time and you'd be looking at potential structural fatigue in your turbine blades." The pilot frowned. "Can you fix it?" Mike was already reaching for his specialized tools, the ones he'd modified himself over the years. 20 minutes. I'll need to adjust the mounting brackets and add some dampening material. Not standard issue, but..." He paused, glancing at the quiet woman under the wing. "I assume you'd prefer a permanent solution over a by-the-book temporary fix." She nodded once, her face partially shadowed, but her eyes sharp and evaluating. The pilot looked between them, then stepped back, letting Mike work. The rain fell steadily. Now, but Mike barely noticed. His world had narrowed to the puzzle before him, hands moving with the certainty that came from thousands of similar repairs. He could feel the woman's continued presence, her silence more attentive than any string of questions would have been. Finally, he stepped back, wiping rain from his face. "Try it now." The engine started with a purr that brought a smile to Mike's face, the sound of perfect mechanical harmony. The pilot ran through his checks, his expression shifting from concern to relief to outright amazement. "I've never heard it run this smoothly," he admitted. "How did you experience?" Mike said simply, packing away his tools. "And maybe a little luck." He turned to the woman, who had yet to speak. "You're good to fly. The modification's actually working better now than it did before. Whoever designed it was brilliant, just needed a slight adjustment for this specific engine type." She studied him for a moment longer, then nodded again. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice carrying an authority that needed no volume to make itself felt. Then she was gone, back into the cabin, leaving Mike standing in the rain with a story he knew nobody would quite believe. The Gulf Stream took off 10 minutes later, rising into the storm-darkened sky with a grace that spoke of mechanical perfection. Mike watched it disappear into the clouds, unaware that this repair would prove to be far more than just another job well done. The problem with the Gulfstream's engine stayed with Mike long after his shift ended. He sat at his workbench in the quieting maintenance bay, turning the modified component over in his hands. Someone had invested serious money in this piece of engineering, the kind of innovation that could revolutionize fuel efficiency if properly implemented. But there was something else about it that nagged at his professional instincts. He pulled out his old, leather-bound notebook, a relic from his apprenticeship days. Inside, alongside 3 decades of technical sketches and solutions, he began, drawing the component from memory. His pencil moved with practiced precision, breaking down the design into its essential elements. "Still here, Collins?" Jerry appeared, jacket already on for heading home. "Emma called the office, looking for you." Mike checked his watch and grimaced. "Lost track of time. There's something about this modification that doesn't add up." He held up the sketch. "Look at the alloy composition. It's not standard aerospace. Grade, it's something else entirely." Jerry leaned in, squinting at the drawing. "That's not possible. The FAA would never certify an experimental alloy without years of testing." "Exactly." Mike's fingers traced the underlying pattern of his sketch. "Unless..." He reached for his toolbox, pulling out a specialized gauge he'd modified years ago for testing metal fatigue in helicopter rotors. The instrument was his own design, cobbled together from spare parts and inspiration, not certified, but more accurate than anything the manufacturers supplied. The readings made his eyebrows rise. "Well, I'll be damned." "What is it?" "This isn't just a modification, it's a prototype." Mike sat back, understanding dawning. "Someone's testing next-generation aerospace materials right under the FAA's nose. They've disguised it as a standard efficiency upgrade. But this alloy..." He shook his head in admiration. "It's at least 5 years ahead of anything currently in use." The quiet woman's attentive presence during the repair made more sense now. This wasn't just another private jet repair. He'd stumbled into something much bigger. Mike pulled out his specialized tools, the ones he'd created over the years to solve problems the manual said couldn't be fixed. Each one represented a lesson, Learned, a challenge overcome. From the bottom of his toolbox came his proudest creation, a harmonic resonance dampener he'd designed after studying violin making. The principle was the same. Perfect tone came from perfect balance. "You're not thinking of modifying a prototype," Jerry said, watching Mike set up his equipment. "That's got to be against about 15 regulations. I'm thinking of making it. Work the way its designer intended." Mike's hands moved with deliberate precision, measuring frequencies and stress points. "See these micro-fractures starting to form? The alloy's revolutionary, but they didn't account for the harmonic resonance. Patterns in a Gulfstream engine housing. Give it another month, and they'd have metal fatigue showing up in places their testing never predicted." He worked through the night, losing himself in the puzzle before him. This wasn't just about fixing a broken part. It was about understanding the vision behind it, the future of aviation taking shape in his hands. His modified tools hummed with purpose, each adjustment bringing the component closer to its true potential. Dawn was breaking when Mike finally sat back, satisfaction warming his tired muscles. The modified component gleamed under the workspace. Lights, its surface reflecting more than just the overhead fluorescence. It reflected decades of accumulated wisdom. "You know," he said to the empty maintenance bay, "sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from understanding the smallest details." He carefully packed away his tools, each one returning to its proper place in the battered toolbox. His father's voice echoed in his memory. A craftsman is only as good as his respect for his tools. The morning shift would be arriving soon. Mike gathered his things, tucking his notebook away with its new sketches and calculations. Something told him he hadn't seen the last of that Gulfstream or its mysterious passenger. In 30 years of fixing aircraft, he'd learned to trust his instincts about these things. As he walked through the awakening airport, the first hints of sunrise painted the eastern sky in shades of promise. A line of aircraft stood silhouetted against the dawn, each one carrying its own stories, its own destinations. Somewhere out there, a modified Gulfstream was flying better than its designers had ever intended, thanks to a mechanic who believed that every problem had a solution if you just looked at it the right way. Mike smiled, feeling the weight of his toolbox, his life's work condensed into portable form. Sometimes the best innovations came not from fancy laboratories or corporate boardrooms, but from the careful hands of those who understood machines the way others understood art. He had no idea how right he was, or how soon that understanding would change his life. Morning light filtered through the high windows of the maintenance bay, casting long shadows across Mike's workbench. He'd managed a few hours of sleep before his shift, just enough to take the edge off his exhaustion. The memory of last night's repair still occupied his thoughts when Martinez from Air Traffic Control appeared at his door. "Hey, Collins. Got something for you." Martinez held out a cream-colored envelope, the kind of stationery that spoke of corner offices and executive decisions. "Came in with the morning courier, marked personal." Mike wiped his hands on his coveralls before accepting the envelope. The paper was thick, expensive, with his name written in elegant cursive. No return address. Inside, he found a single sheet of the same high-quality paper, the handwriting both precise and graceful. "Dear Mr. Collins, your work last night was extraordinary. In 30 years of aviation, I've encountered countless mechanics, but few who understand that true innovation requires both technical excellence and artistry. The modification you improved was indeed a prototype, one that my team has spent 3 years developing. In a single night, you solved problems that had stumped our engineers for months. Your solution was elegant, unconventional, and perfectly executed. But what impressed me most was your respect for the original design's intention. You didn't just fix a problem, you enhanced the underlying vision. Thank you for reminding me that excellence can be found in unexpected places. Regards, S.M. Mike." Read the note twice, then carefully folded it and slipped it into his shirt pocket next to the spot where he'd kept Karen's last note all those years ago. There was something about the writer's words that reached past his professional pride to touch something deeper, an acknowledgement not just of what he did, but of who he was as a craftsman. "Good news?" Martinez asked, lingering by the door. "Someone appreciated the work," Mike replied simply, already turning back to his current project. But his hands moved with an extra measure of care, as if the writer's eyes were still watching, still evaluating. Throughout the day, he found himself reaching up to touch the pocket where the note rested. Its presence reminded him of something. Karen used to say, "Recognition isn't about ego, it's about someone seeing the truth of who you are." The afternoon brought a steady stream of routine repairs, but Mike approached each one with renewed purpose. Every aircraft that passed through his bay received the same attention to detail he'd given the Gulf Stream, every solution considered from multiple angles before being implemented. As his shift wound down, he took out the note one more time. The signature, SM, teased at something familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. In the fluorescent light of the maintenance bay, the elegant handwriting seemed to belong to another world entirely. Yet its message bridged the gap between corporate, aviation and shop floor wisdom with unexpected grace. Jerry caught him studying the note. "Love letter?" Mike shook his head, smiling slightly. "Just someone who understands that fixing things isn't always about following the manual." He tucked the note away again, its weight light against his chest, but somehow significant. Sometimes it's about seeing the poetry in the machinery. The day's last light was fading as Mike gathered his tools, each one returning to its appointed place in his father's toolbox. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems to solve, but tonight he carried with him the rare satisfaction of being truly seen and understood, not just as a mechanic, but as someone who found art in the precise dance of metal and motion. Outside, a Gulfstream climbed into the evening sky, its engines singing a perfect harmony. Mike watched it disappear into the clouds, wondering if somewhere out there, an elegant hand was perhaps writing another note, making another plan. Something told him this wasn't the end of the story, just the quiet moment before the next chapter began. The morning paper lay folded on Mike's kitchen table, unopened next to his cooling coffee. The headline about a major airline merger caught his eye, but his attention was fixed on the thick envelope from Northwestern University that Emma had placed in the center of the table like a time bomb. "Dad," Emma said from across the table, still in her pajamas, her mother's determination written across her face. "We need to talk about this." Mike took a slow sip of coffee, buying time. The acceptance letter's contents were already committed. To memory, congratulations, prestigious pre-med program, and a number that made his chest tight. "There's nothing to talk about, sweetheart. This is your dream. We'll find a way." Emma pulled out a stack of papers, research, calculations, part-time job listings, so much like her mother, attacking problems with meticulous preparation. "I've done the math. Even with the partial scholarship and my savings from working at Aunt Sarah's, we're still short by thousands, and that's just for the first year." The morning sun streamed through their small kitchen window, catching the worry lines around Emma's eyes, lines no 17-year-old should have. Mike reached across the table, covering her hand with his own work-roughened one. "Your mother and I started saving for your education the day we brought you home from the hospital," he said softly. "And when she got sick, she made me promise." "I know, Dad." Emma squeezed his hand. "But Mom would also want you to be practical. You're already working extra shifts. The apartment needs repairs. Your truck's barely running." "I had an interesting repair job last night," Mike interrupted, pulling the elegant thank you note from his shirt pocket. He didn't know why he brought it up, except perhaps to show that unexpected things could happen, that solutions sometimes came from unlikely places. Emma read the note, her eyebrows rising. "SM? Who's that?" "Don't know," Mike admitted, retrieving the note and returning it to his pocket. "But sometimes life has a way of—" The kitchen radio, always tuned to the local news during breakfast, suddenly increased in volume. And in business news, industry insiders are buzzing about Matthews International Airways' surprise acquisition of Western Regional Airlines. Sources say CEO Sarah Matthews personally negotiated the deal, adding another strategic asset to her growing aviation empire. Matthews, known for her hands-on approach to... Emma reached over and turned down the volume. "Dad, you can't keep avoiding this conversation. Northwestern needs an answer by next week. Maybe I should consider community college first, then transfer." "No." Mike stood up, taking his coffee cup to the sink. The morning sun caught his reflection in the window. When had his hair gotten so grey? "Your mother and I always said education comes first. You got into one of the best pre-med programs in the country. We're not settling for less." The familiar sound of Jerry's truck backfiring echoed from the street below, his carpool ride to work. Mike grabbed his toolbox and lunch, but paused at the door. Emma sat at the table, surrounded by her carefully prepared papers, looking so young and so old at the same time. "Trust me, sweetheart," he said. "I've got a few ideas. Just give me until the end of the week." He didn't, of course, have ideas. But 30 years of fixing impossible problems had taught him that solutions often appeared when you least expected them. The thank you note crinkled in his pocket as he hurried down the stairs, a reminder that sometimes expertise and excellence could open unexpected doors. Jerry was waiting in his battered pickup, classic rock playing too loud for this early in the morning. "You see the news about Matthews Airways? Word is they're sending representatives to inspect all their newly acquired facilities. O'Hare's on the list." Mike settled into the passenger seat, his toolbox between his feet. The morning traffic crawled toward the airport, brake lights glowing in the early haze. His mind wandered between Emma's college dilemma and the elegant handwriting of the mystery note. The newspaper headline about the airline merger flashed in his memory. "You okay, Mike? You've got that look, the one you get when you're trying to solve an impossible repair." Mike nodded, watching the airport's control tower rise above the morning fog. "Just thinking about how life's biggest challenges rarely come with instruction manuals." The airport appeared ahead, its runways stretching like possibilities. Somewhere in the morning traffic, a solution was waiting. Mike Collins had spent his life fixing broken things. Surely the universe would give him a chance to fix this, too. He couldn't have known that at that very moment, a very particular Gulf Stream was beginning its descent into O'Hare, carrying with it answers to questions he hadn't even thought to ask. The morning fog had barely lifted when Mike heard the distinctive sound of multiple jet engines approaching in formation. He stepped out of the maintenance bay, tools still in hand, and watched as 3 gleaming aircraft descended from the pearl grey sky. A Gulf Stream flanked by 2 larger corporate jets, their polished surfaces catching the emerging sunlight. "Collins!" Martinez's voice crackled over the radio. "You're needed on tarmac, a priority call." The Gulf Stream was familiar, the same one he'd repaired 2 nights ago. But now, as it taxied to a stop, Mike noticed the subtle logo on its tail, a stylized M that matched the larger aircraft flanking it. His pulse quickened as he recognized the corporate insignia he'd seen in that morning's newspaper, Matthews International Airways. The ground crew scrambled to position the stairs as the Gulfstream's door opened. Mike stood quietly, his father's toolbox at his feet, watching as a figure emerged into the morning light. The woman from the other night stepped out, but now there was nothing quiet or unassuming about her presence. Dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, her silver-streaked dark hair caught in the breeze, she carried herself with the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to running an empire. "Mr. Collins," she said, descending the stairs with graceful efficiency, "I hope you don't mind the dramatic entrance. I find it saves time to make my intentions clear from the start." She extended her hand. "Sarah Matthews, though you might know me better as SM." Mike shook her hand, noting the calluses that spoke of more than just boardroom battles. "The thank you note writer," a smile touched her eyes, "and the owner of what is now the largest independent airline fleet in North America, thanks in part to your work the other night." She gestured to the modified engine housing. Our engineers have been studying your solution. Brilliant doesn't begin to describe it. She pulled a folder from her briefcase. Thick, official looking. That prototype you improved? It's part of a new generation of fuel-efficient engines we've been developing. 3 years of research, millions in development, and in one night, a maintenance mechanic with modified tools solved our resonance problem. She paused, studying him with those sharp eyes. Tell me, Mr. Collins, how did you know to adjust the harmonic frequencies? Experience, Mike said simply. And I used to repair violins on the side after my wife passed. Same principles, really. Everything has its perfect resonance. You just have to listen for it. Sarah Matthews nodded, as if he'd confirmed something she'd already suspected. I've spent the last 2 days reviewing your personnel file. 30 years of experience, countless innovations, solutions to problems that other mechanics declared impossible. She opened the folder. And not a single attempt at promotion or transfer to corporate engineering. Mike glanced at his toolbox, its scratched surface reflecting decades of choices. I prefer hands-on work. Always have. And that's exactly why I'm here. She handed him the folder. Matthews International Airways is expanding. We've just acquired Western Regional, which means we need someone who understands both the technical and practical aspects of fleet maintenance. Someone who can bridge the gap between corporate engineering and shop floor reality. Inside the folder was a contract. The salary figure made Mike's breath catch, but it was the benefits package that held his attention, including a comprehensive education scholarship program for dependents. Director of Engineering Operations, Sarah continued. You'd oversee maintenance standards across our entire fleet with the freedom to implement your own innovations. A full engineering team at your disposal, but you'd still be hands-on when you want to be. Mike looked up from the contract to find her watching him intently. Why me? Because in 30 years of aviation, I've learned that true excellence isn't found in degrees or certifications. It's found in people who understand that every machine has a soul, every problem has a solution, and sometimes the best innovations come from hands that know the work. She smiled slightly. The note writer in me recognized a kindred spirit. The CEO in me recognized an asset we can't afford to lose to another company. The morning sun had burned away the last of the fog, revealing the full scope of the aircraft. Arrayed on the tarmac, each one bearing that stylized M, each one representing possibilities he'd never imagined for himself or Emma. Take the weekend to think about it, Sarah said, turning back toward her aircraft. Though I suspect you're like me, you've already made your decision, you're just working out the details. She paused at the stairs. Oh, and Mr. Collins, bring your toolbox when you come. Something tells me we're going to need those modified tools of yours. Mike watched the aircraft depart, the contract heavy in his hands, his world shifting like runway lights, coming into focus after a foggy morning. Above him, a flock of geese flew in perfect formation, their wings catching the sunlight, leading the way toward something new. Monday morning found Mike standing in the gleaming lobby of Matthews International Airways, Chicago headquarters, his father's toolbox looking distinctly out of place among the steel and glass architecture. The security guard handed him a sleek keycard with his photo already embedded in it. Everything moved at a different speed in Sarah Matthews' world. 8th floor, Mr. Collins, the guard said, gesturing to the executive elevator. Ms. Matthews is waiting. The toolbox is familiar. Weight grounded him as he navigated this new territory. His reflection in the elevator's polished doors showed a man caught between worlds. New charcoal suit, Emma's insistence, paired with his well-worn work boots. His own non-negotiable term. The elevator opened directly into a suite of engineering offices. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, aircraft moved across O'Hare's runways like pieces on a chessboard. Sarah Matthews stood at those windows, studying the morning traffic with the same attention she'd given his repair work. Right on time, she said, turning to greet him. And I see you brought the toolbox. Good. Your team's eager to see what's inside. My team? She gestured to the conference room where a dozen people sat waiting. Engineers in business casual, mechanics in corporate uniforms, all watching him with careful curiosity. The best minds from both Matthews and Western Regional. They've all read my report on your Gulfstream repair. Fair warning, they have questions. Mike set his toolbox on. The conference table. Its scratched surface, a testament to decades of problem solving. Where would you like me to start? Show them why I hired you, Sarah said simply, taking a seat at the back of the room. Mike opened his toolbox, retrieving the harmonic resonance dampener he'd used on the Gulfstream. This looks like a hobby project, he began, because it started. It's one. I used to repair violins, and one day I realized that aircraft engines aren't so different from musical instruments. For the next 2 hours, he walked them through his innovations, each modified tool, each unorthodox solution. The engineer's skepticism gradually transformed into professional curiosity, then genuine enthusiasm. They gathered around his diagrams, asking questions that bridged the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical experience. The dampener's frequency response curve is remarkable, one young engineer said, examining Mike's hand-drawn schematics. We could adapt this principle for our entire next-generation engine line. That's exactly why he's here, Sarah's voice cut in from the back. Mr. Collins will be overseeing the integration of his methods into our standard procedures. I expect full cooperation from both engineering and maintenance departments. A ripple of excitement moved through the room. Mike caught Sarah watching him with quiet approval. She'd known exactly how this would play out. Later, in his new office, a space that somehow managed to feel both corporate and practical, Sarah stopped by. Productive first morning? Mike was already setting up his workbench by the window, tools arranged with mechanical precision. They're good people, smart, just need someone to bridge the gap between theory and application. That's what I'm counting on. She handed him another folder. Your first official project. Western Regional's maintenance facilities need standardization across all locations. I want your eyes on every station. Mike opened the folder, finding travel itineraries, facility reports, and maintenance logs. You're not wasting any time. Time is the one resource we can't engineer more of, she said, that slight smile touching her eyes again, though I suspect you'll find ways to make better use of it than my previous directors. As she turned to leave, Mike called after her, Ms. Matthews, thank you. Not just for the job, but for seeing something worth investing in. She paused at the door. Mr. Collins, in 30 years of building this company, I've learned that the best investments aren't in machines or materials. They're in people who understand that excellence isn't about titles or corporate hierarchy. It's about doing what you love and doing it better than anyone else. She gestured to his toolbox. Keep that on your desk. Let everyone who comes through that door see that craftsmanship has a place in the corporate world. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, catching the brass fittings on his father's toolbox. Outside, aircraft rose and landed in an endless dance of precision and possibility. Mike Collins sat at his new desk, surrounded by the trappings of corporate success, but his hands still itched to solve problems, to fix what was broken, to make things work better than they had before. Some things, he realized, don't change with a new title or a corner office. They just find bigger spaces in which to flourish. The old aviation magazine lay open on Mike's new desk, its pages yellowed with age. The cover story, dated 20 years ago, featured a younger Sarah Matthews standing beside a small cargo plane, her hands bearing the same practical calluses. They showed today. The headline read, Matthews Air Cargo, How One Woman's Vision is Reshaping Regional Aviation. Mike had found the magazine in the company archives while researching maintenance histories, but it was the photographs that caught his attention. Sarah in coveralls, checking engine components. Sarah in the pilot's seat, flight logs spread across her knee. Sarah standing with her father beside their first aircraft, both wearing the same determined expression. Light reading? Sarah's voice came from his doorway. She crossed to his desk, picking up the magazine with an expression caught between amusement and nostalgia. I haven't seen this in years." "You were a mechanic," Mike said. "It wasn't a question. And a pilot, and a cargo handler when we were short-staffed." She sat in the chair across from his desk, the magazine open in her lap. "My father believed in understanding every aspect of the business from the ground up. Quite literally, in our case." Mike nodded toward the photograph of her and her father. "Single-engine Cessna cargo runs? Whatever needed moving, whenever it needed to move. Whether that bigger airlines wouldn't fly in, runways they wouldn't land on." Her fingers traced the edge of the photograph. "Dad used to say that anybody could run a business from a corner office, but real leadership happens in the trenches." What happened to the cargo operation? Sarah's eyes remained on the magazine, but her focus seemed distant. "Dad died in '95. Heart attack on the runway after a difficult landing in bad weather. I was in the right seat." She looked up, meeting Mike's gaze. "The bank gave me 30 days to either sell or show a viable expansion plan. And you chose expansion. I chose survival. Mortgaged everything, bought 2 more aircraft, and started bidding on bigger contracts. When the regional airlines began struggling in the late '90s, we were positioned to step in. The rest..." She gestured to the view of aircraft bearing the Matthews logo. "Well, you're looking at it." Mike thought about his own trajectory, the long nights learning his craft, the years of solving problems others couldn't see. "But you still keep your pilot's license current." A smile touched her lips. "You've been reading my file." "Professional curiosity. Professional recognizing professional," she corrected, standing to look out at the runway operations below. "That's why you're here, Mr. Collins. In all my acquisitions, all my expansions, I've never lost sight of what my father taught me. Excellence starts in the details, in understanding the soul of what you're building." She turned back to him, her expression thoughtful. "The Western Regional Integration Team tells me you've already revolutionized their maintenance protocols. 3 weeks, and you've solved problems they've had for years, just applying practical experience to theoretical problems. You're being modest. The chief engineer showed me your proposals. You're not just fixing their procedures, you're reinventing them." She placed the magazine back on his desk. "Which is why I'd like you to accompany me on the West Coast facility. Inspections next week. 4 days, 6 maintenance bases. I want your eyes on everything." Mike thought of Emma, now settled into her dorm at Northwestern, her future secure thanks to the company's scholarship program. "I'll have my report ready." "No reports," Sarah interrupted. "I want your direct observations, your unfiltered insights. We'll take the corporate jet, the one you fixed. It's been running better than new since your modifications." There was something in her tone that went beyond professional appreciation, a note of personal understanding that resonated with Mike's own devotion to craftsmanship. Here was someone who, despite all her success, still thought like a mechanic, still valued the poetry of perfectly functioning machinery. "I'll clear my schedule," he said. She nodded, turning to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Mr. Collins, bring your toolbox. Something tells me we might find some interesting problems to solve along the way." After she left, Mike studied the magazine. Photo again. Sarah Matthews in her coveralls, hands dirty from honest work, eyes already fixed on a future she was determined to build. Some people, he realized, never really leave the shop floor, no matter how high they climb. They just find bigger workshops to master. Outside his window, a Matthews aircraft lifted into the afternoon sky, its engines singing that perfect harmony he'd helped create. Sometimes the best partnerships, he thought, aren't formed in boardrooms or over contracts, but in the shared understanding of what it means to build something that lasts. The scholarship letter arrived on Northwestern University letterhead, bearing both the Matthews International Airways logo and Emma's name. Mike sat at his kitchen table, the morning sun warming the envelope, as he read its contents for the 3rd time. Full tuition, room and board, books, and a stipend for 4 years of pre-med studies, with a guaranteed extension for medical school if she maintained her grades. His coffee had grown cold, forgotten, as he struggled with emotions he hadn't expected. Gratitude wrestling with pride, relief tangled with an instinctive resistance to accepting help. The amount far exceeded the standard corporate scholarship. This was something else entirely. "Dad?" Emma stood in the doorway, still in her weekend pajamas, her eyes fixed on the letter in his hands. "Is that—" "Sit down, sweetheart." He pushed the envelope across the table. "Ms. Matthews dropped this off personally last night." Emma's hands trembled slightly as she read, her expression shifting from hope to disbelief to joy. "But this is— Dad, this is everything. 4 years guaranteed with medical school." She looked up, tears brightening her eyes. "How?" "Ms. Matthews believes in investing in potential," Mike said, remembering Sarah's words from their conversation. The previous evening, she had appeared at his door unannounced, the envelope in hand, declining his invitation to come in. "Your daughter's academic record is exceptional," Sarah had said, her professional demeanor softened by something more personal. And her essay about growing up watching her father fix broken things, about learning that every problem has a solution if you just understand it well enough. She had smiled then, a genuine warmth breaking through her usual reserve. "Let's just say it resonated." Now, watching Emma read through the details again, Mike felt the weight of the past months lifting. No more sleepless nights calculating numbers that wouldn't add up. No more quiet guilt about Karen's medical bills eating into their college savings. "Dad?" Emma's voice brought him back to the present. "It says here that summer internships at Matthews' engineering division are included. But I'm pre-med, not engineering." Mike smiled, recognizing Sarah's subtle thoughtfulness. "The letter Ms. Matthews left for you explains it." He nodded to the second envelope, still unopened. Emma opened it carefully, unfolding a handwritten note. "On Sarah's personal stationery, dear Emma, your father has taught me that understanding how things work is the first step to making them work better. Medicine and engineering share this fundamental truth. They're both about solving problems, about fixing what's broken, about making things whole again. The summer internships are optional, but they offer something medical schools value: practical experience in complex problem solving. Your father's approach to mechanical challenges isn't so different from a doctor's approach to medical ones. Both require precision, understanding, and sometimes the courage to try unconventional solutions. Your essay showed me that you've already learned these lessons from him. This scholarship is an investment in where those lessons might take you. Make your father proud. Though I suspect you already do that every day. Warmest regards, Sarah Matthews." Emma read the note twice, then handed it to Mike. The morning sun caught the tears on her cheeks. "She gets it, doesn't she? About you? About how you see things?" Mike felt something shift in his chest as he read Sarah's words. The way she had seen through to the heart of his relationship with Emma. The way she understood that his work had always been about more than just fixing machines. "Ms. Matthews knows something about fathers who teach their children to solve problems," he said quietly, "and about building things that last." Emma got up and hugged him, the scholarship letter pressed between them. "I love you, Dad, and I promise I'll make this count." "I know you will, sweetheart." He held her close, thinking of Karen, knowing she would have loved this moment. "I know you will." Later, after Emma had gone to share the news with her aunt, Mike sat looking at Sarah's handwritten note. The elegant script carried the same precision he'd seen in her work, the same attention to detail that had built an airline empire. But there was something else there too, an understanding of dreams and their costs, of fathers and daughters, of the legacy of lessons passed down through generations. He reached for his phone, then hesitated. A thank you call seemed inadequate for what she had given them. Some gifts, he realized, required more than words to acknowledge. They required actions, proof that the investment was worthy, that the faith was well placed. Tomorrow, he would show her the innovations he'd been working on for the West Coast expansion. It wasn't a thank you, exactly, but it was what he had to offer. Excellence given in exchange for kindness, craftsmanship offered as gratitude. The technical proposal sat on Mike's desk, like a gauntlet thrown down by the corporate world. 30 pages of specifications for standardizing maintenance procedures across all Matthews International facilities, with his name listed as project lead. The engineering team was waiting for his presentation in an hour, and he could feel the weight of expectations pressing in with the morning sun. This wasn't just about fixing planes anymore. This was about reshaping how an entire airline approached maintenance, about bridging the gap between corporate efficiency and shop floor reality. Mike picked up his father's old mechanical pencil, the one he'd used to draft his first repair diagrams, and began marking up the proposal's margins with the practical wisdom of 30 years. A knock at his door made him look up. Robert Chen, Western Regional's former head of engineering, stood in the doorway. His crisp suit and carefully neutral expression couldn't quite hide his skepticism. "Mr. Collins, I hope I'm not interrupting." Chen's tone suggested he didn't particularly care if he was. "I've reviewed your draft proposals for the standardization project." Mike gestured to a chair. "I'm guessing you have concerns." "With all due respect." Chen settled into the chair, pulling out his own copy of the proposal. "These modifications you're suggesting, they completely overhaul systems that have been in place for decades. The cost alone will be offset by the reduction in maintenance downtime within the first year," Mike finished, pulling out his own calculations. He'd spent weeks compiling data, measuring his innovations against real-world conditions. "Your current system requires full engine checks every 500 flight hours. With my modifications, we can safely extend that to 750 hours while actually improving reliability." Chen's expression tightened. "These are theoretical projections?" "No," Mike interrupted quietly, reaching into his desk drawer. He withdrew a battered logbook, its pages dense with handwritten notes and calculations. "These are real numbers. From real repairs, tracked over 20 years, every innovation in that proposal has been tested and proven in the field." He opened the logbook to a particular page. "See this entry from 2015, a modification I developed for reducing harmonic stress in turbine assemblies. Been using it at O'Hare for 8 years without a single failure. Your current system has a failure rate of 2.3% in the same component." Chen leaned forward despite himself, engineering curiosity overcoming corporate resistance. "These results, they're remarkably consistent because they're not theoretical." Mike stood, walking to his workbench where his latest prototype sat partially assembled. "Every innovation in that proposal started right here, solving real problems with real aircraft. The only difference now is scale." A movement at the door caught his attention. Sarah Matthews stood watching, her expression unreadable. How long had she been there? "Mr. Chen," she said, stepping into the office. "I trust you're finding Mr. Collins's work illuminating?" Chen straightened in his chair. "Ms. Matthews, yes, we were just discussing the standardization proposal, the one I specifically brought Mr. Collins in to develop." Her tone was pleasant, but carried an edge of steel. "The one that will bring Western Regional's maintenance standards up to Matthews International specifications?" "Of course," Chen managed. "I was merely expressing some concerns about implementation costs, which Mr. Collins has already addressed, judging by the documentation I see on his desk." Sarah moved to the workbench, picking up one of Mike's modified tools with the familiarity of someone who knew exactly what she was holding. "Do you know why I hired him, Mr. Chen?" Chen glanced between them. "His experience, his vision." Sarah set the tool down carefully. While others were maintaining the status quo, Mr. Collins was innovating, improving, solving problems others couldn't see. "That's what Matthews International needs as we expand." She turned to Mike. "The board meeting starts in 45 minutes. Are you ready to present?" Mike gathered his logbook and the annotated proposal. "Yes, ma'am." "Good." She turned back to Chen. "I expect your full support on this project, Robert. Mr. Collins isn't just updating our maintenance procedures. He's bringing us into the future." After Chen left, Sarah lingered. He's not wrong about the resistance you'll face. Change is never easy, especially in aviation. Mike looked down at his logbook, at decades of problems solved and innovations proven. Maybe it's not about changing things. Maybe it's about helping people see what's possible. Sarah smiled, that rare, warm expression that transformed her entire face. That's exactly why you're here. She moved to leave, then paused. Oh, and... Mike, when you present to the board, show them your hands. He looked at her questioningly. Those calluses tell a story that all their MBAs and spreadsheets can't argue with. They're the proof that theory and practice can work together. She gestured to his workbench. Bring one of your modified tools too. Let them see that innovation doesn't always wear a suit and tie. After she left, Mike stood at his window, watching aircraft taxi across the morning tarmac. Each one represented lives and livelihoods, safety and reliability, progress and tradition. In his hands, he held the proposal that would help bridge those worlds. He picked up his father's pencil and made one final note in the margin. Sometimes the best way forward is to remember where you came from. The small coffee shop tucked away in Terminal 3 was nearly empty at this hour, caught in that quiet lull between the morning rush and afternoon flights. Mike sat at a corner table, his hands wrapped around a ceramic mug that had seen better days. Much like the shop itself, which had somehow survived countless airport renovations without losing its worn charm. Sarah Matthews arrived precisely on time, though without her usual corporate armor. In jeans and a casual blazer, her silver-streaked hair loose around her shoulders, she looked more like the mechanic from that old magazine photo than the CEO of an airline empire. "I hope you don't mind meeting here," she said, settling into the chair across from him. "Sometimes I need to escape the executive suite, get back to where the real work happens." The elderly barista brought over Sarah's coffee without being asked, clearly a regular order. The mug matched Mike's, equally worn, equally authentic. "Your board approved the standardization proposal," Sarah said, taking a sip, "unanimously after your presentation. I particularly enjoyed the moment when you showed them your modified torque wrench and explained how it could save millions in maintenance costs." Mike smiled, remembering the board members' faces as he demonstrated the tool's precision. Experience tends to win over theory when you can prove it works. Speaking of experience, Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a familiar object, a violin bridge, aged but beautifully crafted. "I found this in our technical archives. Your work, I believe, from when you used to repair instruments." Mike took the bridge carefully, memories flooding back. Must be 15 years ago. One of the baggage handlers was a violinist, couldn't afford proper repairs. I noticed the same principles of stress and harmonics applied to both aircraft and instruments. "That's what fascinated me," Sarah said, watching him examine the piece. "The way you see connections others miss. It's not just mechanical skill, it's understanding the underlying principles of how things work, how they could work better." A comfortable silence settled between them as Mike turned the bridge over in his hands. Through the window, aircraft moved across the evening tarmac, their lights blinking like earthbound stars. "I never thanked you properly," Mike said finally. "For Emma's scholarship, it's more than generous. It's an investment," Sarah interrupted gently. "In talent, in potential. Just like hiring you was." She paused, considering her next words. "My father believed that true excellence should be nurtured wherever you find it. The scholarship program was one of the first things I established after taking over the company." "Tell me about him," Mike said, recognizing the same tone he used. When speaking of Karen, Sarah's fingers traced the rim of her coffee mug. "He was a lot like you, actually. Believed in solving problems hands-on, in understanding the soul of what you're working with. Started with one cargo plane and a dream of building something that would last." She smiled softly. "He used to say that machines don't care about your degrees or your title. They only care about whether you understand them." Sounds like a wise man. He would have liked you. Sarah met his eyes. Would have appreciated the way you blend innovation with respect for craft. That's rare these days. The evening light softened the coffee shop's worn edges, lending everything a gentle glow. Outside, a Matthews aircraft took off, its engines humming with the perfect harmony Mike had helped create. Karen, my late wife, she used to say something similar, Mike found himself saying, about how understanding comes from patience, from taking the time to really see how things work. She was a teacher, but she approached it like I approach. Mechanics, figuring out the underlying patterns, finding ways to make things work better. Sarah nodded, understanding in her eyes. We carry them with us, don't we? In how we see the world, in how we solve problems, in how we build things that last, Mike added quietly. Their coffee had grown cold, forgotten in the depth of conversation. The elderly barista smiled knowingly as she refilled their mugs, adding to the collection of rings on the worn wooden table, circles of time shared between two people who understood the value of craftsmanship, of building something meaningful. As the evening settled around them, their conversation drifted from technical challenges to personal histories, from professional goals to quiet dreams. The boundary between CEO and director, between corporate hierarchy and human connection, softened like the fading daylight. Sometimes, Mike realized, the most important connections aren't forged in boardrooms or maintenance bays, but in quiet. Moments when two people recognize in each other a shared understanding of what matters most. The emergency alarm shattered the pre-dawn quiet of Matthews International's operations center. Mike arrived to find organized chaos. Technicians hunched over monitors, controllers speaking in clipped tones, and Sarah Matthews already there, her usual composure tensed with concern. 13 aircraft grounded across 3 time zones, she said without preamble, all reporting the same critical engine sensor malfunction. The FAA's giving us 12 hours to identify and fix the problem, or they ground our entire fleet. The emergency protocol manual lay open on the central desk, its procedures suddenly inadequate for the scale of this crisis. Mike studied the incoming data streams, his mind already shifting into the focused state that complex problems demanded. Show me the maintenance logs for the affected aircraft, he said, pulling out his notebook, and get me a direct line to our teams on the ground. The pattern emerged slowly as reports flowed in from Seattle, Chicago, and Boston. Each grounded aircraft had recently undergone routine maintenance, each following the new standardized procedures he'd implemented. The correlation was impossible to ignore. It's my fault, Mike said quietly, meeting Sarah's eyes. The standardization protocols, there must be a flaw in the sensor calibration sequence. The room fell silent. Robert Chen, who had fought against the new procedures, stepped forward with barely concealed satisfaction. Ms. Matthews, if we immediately revert to our previous protocols, no. Mike's voice carried the certainty of decades of problem-solving. Reverting now would only compound the problem. The sensors are reading false positives because they're actually working better than before. They're detecting a harmonic frequency that the old system missed entirely. He moved to the central display, fingers flying across the keyboard as he pulled up his original designs. Look here. The new calibration sequence is picking up a subtle resonance pattern. It's not a malfunction. It's an early warning system we didn't know we had. Sarah stepped closer, studying the data. Explain. The sensors aren't failing, they're succeeding too well. They're detecting a wear pattern in the turbine assemblies months before it would become dangerous. Mike turned to her, excitement breaking through his professional demeanor. We accidentally created an early warning system for metal fatigue. That's speculation, Chen protested. We can't risk. I can prove it, Mike interrupted, but I'll need direct access to one of the affected engines, and I'll need my tools. Sarah held his gaze for a long moment, weighing 30 years of corporate responsibility against the certainty she saw in his eyes. The nearest affected aircraft is at O'Hare. How long? 2 hours with the engine, then maybe 30 minutes to modify the sensor protocols. She nodded once. Do it. I'll handle the FAA. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of focused intensity. Mike worked on the engine with the same patience he'd once given to violin repairs, understanding that rushing would only mask the truth he needed to find. His modified tools, originally viewed with skepticism by the corporate engineering team, now drew respectful attention as he demonstrated their precision. Sarah stayed nearby, handling a stream of calls from regulators and board members while watching Mike work. She fielded demands for his immediate dismissal with the same quiet authority she used to run her airline, firm, final, and founded on complete trust in his abilities. Finally, Mike straightened up from the engine, his expression vindicated. Got it. The new sensors are detecting a microscopic wear pattern in the turbine blade assemblies. Under the old system, we wouldn't have caught it until the mandatory replacement schedule. Now we can predict exactly when each engine will need servicing. He pulled out his notebook, showing Sarah the calculations. We can modify the sensor protocols to monitor the pattern without triggering emergency alerts. Turn a crisis into a breakthrough in preventive maintenance. Sarah studied the numbers, then looked at the assembled team. Make the modifications. I want every aircraft in our fleet updated within 24 hours. She turned to Chen. Robert, I expect your full cooperation in implementing these changes. As the team dispersed to execute the new orders, Sarah touched Mike's arm. You knew, didn't you, when you first developed the standardization protocols? You knew they might reveal problems we hadn't seen before. Mike wiped his hands on a shop rag, choosing his words carefully. I knew that better diagnostics might show us things we weren't expecting. That's what innovation does. It makes us see more clearly, even when the truth is uncomfortable. She smiled, that rare, warm expression that transformed her professional mask. That's why I trust you, Mike. You understand that progress isn't about avoiding problems. It's about being brave enough to find them before they find us. The crisis had been averted, but something more important had been proven. In the face of potential disaster, trust had been tested and vindicated. Innovation had been challenged and validated. And in the quiet aftermath, as the first rays of dawn painted the aircraft on the tarmac in shades of possibility, two people who understood the value of seeing things clearly found their professional partnership deepening into something more profound. The aroma of Karen's lasagna recipe filled Mike's small apartment kitchen. Emma had insisted on cooking, saying her first semester of pre-med hadn't made her forget the family recipes she'd learned at her mother's side. Mike watched her move confidently around the kitchen, so like Karen in her precise measurements and careful attention to detail. Are you sure Miss Matthews won't mind coming to our place? Emma asked, checking the oven timer. I mean, she probably has fancy restaurants taking up her entire calendar. Sarah said she'd prefer this, Mike replied, noting how naturally he'd started using her first name. Said she hasn't had a home-cooked meal in months. The doorbell rang precisely at 7. Sarah stood in the doorway holding a bottle of wine, dressed casually in slacks and a soft sweater. The corporate CEO was nowhere to be seen. This was simply a woman coming to dinner with friends, family. The boundaries were still delightfully unclear. Something smells wonderful, Sarah said, stepping inside. Her eyes took in the modest apartment with genuine appreciation. The wall of family photos, the bookshelf filled with technical manuals and medical textbooks, the violin mounted in a place of honor above Mike's workbench. Emma emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron that had once been her mother's. Miss Matthews, thank you so much for coming, and for everything with Northwestern. Sarah, please, she interrupted gently, and you don't need to thank me. Your father's innovations have already saved the company millions. If anything, we're in your family's debt. She handed Mike the wine. From my father's collection. He always said good wine, like good engineering, improves with age. They settled into an easy conversation over dinner, the lasagna serving as both meal and memory. Emma shared stories about her pre-med studies, her eyes lighting up when Sarah revealed that her mother had been a doctor. Really? Dad, did you know that? Mike shook his head, watching Sarah's expression soften with remembrance. She ran a small practice in rural Montana, Sarah explained. That's actually how the cargo business started. My father would fly medical supplies to remote clinics. Sometimes I'd ride along, watching her work miracles with limited resources. She smiled at Emma. She used to say that medicine, like aviation, is about understanding systems and solving problems. That's exactly what Dad always says about mechanical engineering. Emma turned to Mike. Remember when I was little, and you taught me to diagnose engine problems by listening to them? You said it was just like using a stethoscope. Your father's good at seeing connections others miss, Sarah said, her eyes meeting Mike's briefly. It's what makes him exceptional at what he does. A comfortable silence settled over the table, filled with the warmth of shared understanding. Emma got up to serve dessert, Karen's apple pie, another inherited recipe, and Sarah moved to help her. The two falling into an easy rhythm in the small kitchen. Mike watched them through the doorway, struck by how natural it felt. The photo on the wall caught his eye. Karen holding newborn Emma, her smile radiant. For the first time in years, the sight brought more warmth than pain. Mum would have liked her, Emma said quietly, returning to the table while Sarah took a call in the kitchen. Sarah, I mean. She gets it, about family, about building things that last. Mike nodded, hearing Sarah's quiet laughter drift in from the kitchen. Your mother always said the best people are the ones who understand what really matters. Later, after Emma had left for her late-night study group, Sarah lingered by the family photo wall. Her fingers traced the edge of a frame holding a picture of Mike teaching young Emma to use a wrench, both of their faces intent with concentration. Thank you for dinner, she said, for sharing this with me. It's been a long time since I felt this kind of warmth. Mike stood beside her, looking at the photos, the story of his family told, in moments captured and preserved. Emma's right, you know. Karen would have liked you. Sarah turned to him, her expression open and vulnerable in a way he'd never seen. At the office. Because I understand about building things that last. Because you understand that the most important things we build aren't made of metal and machinery. He gestured to the wall of memories. They're made of moments like this. The evening settled around them like a comfortable blanket. The city, lights twinkling beyond the windows. On the kitchen counter, Emma had left the family photo she'd insisted on taking before leaving. The three of them around the dinner table, laughing at something now forgotten. The beginning of something new, captured in pixel and print, ready to take its place on the wall of memories. The 2 airline tickets lay on Mike's desk, like compass needles pointing toward an unexpected future. First-class passages to Singapore, where Matthews International was opening its new Asia-Pacific engineering headquarters. The accompanying proposal outlined his potential role, Director of International Operations, overseeing the implementation of his maintenance innovations across 3 continents. It's a 2-year commitment initially, Sarah had explained that morning, standing in his office with an unusual hesitancy in her voice. The facility needs someone who understands both the technical and human elements of what we're building, someone who can bridge cultures the way you bridge theory and practice. Now, hours later, Mike sat alone with the decision weighing on him. The Singapore operation would be revolutionary, a chance to implement his ideas on a global scale, to reshape how aviation maintenance was approached across the industry. The kind of opportunity that came once in a lifetime. And yet, his fingers traced the edges of the tickets, feeling the texture of possibility. Emma was flourishing at Northwestern, her pre-med studies already drawing attention from research programs. She had her own life now, her own path to follow. But still, the soft knock at his door wasn't Sarah's usual confident rap. Emma stood there, still in her university sweatshirt, looking somehow both younger and older than her years. Dad, your assistant called me about the Singapore offer. Mike gestured to the chair across from his desk. I was going to tell you over dinner tonight. It's just preliminary. It's an amazing opportunity," Emma interrupted, settling into the chair. "And you're hesitating because of me, aren't you?" He looked at his daughter, Karen's determination shining in her eyes, but something of his own quiet thoughtfulness there too. "It's not just that. It's—" He gestured to the office, the view of O'Hare's runways beyond. "We built a life here. Your mother and I, and then you and I after she was gone. Everything we are is rooted in this place." Emma reached across the desk, picking up one of the tickets. "Mom always said that roots aren't about staying in one place. They're about knowing where you come from, so you can grow in new directions." She smiled softly. "I learned that from watching you, you know. How you took what Grandpa taught you about tools and machines and built something new with it." "When did you get so wise?" Mike asked, hearing Karen's words in his daughter's voice. "I had good teachers." Emma's expression turned thoughtful. "Does Sarah know you're struggling with this decision?" Mike shook his head. "She presented the opportunity this morning, said to take a few days to think about it. But it's not just a professional opportunity, is it?" Emma's perception, sharp as a surgeon's blade, cut to the heart of the matter. "I've seen how you look at her, Dad, how she looks at you, the way you both understand things that most people miss." Mike sat back, studying his daughter's face. "When did you become so observant about relationships?" "Maybe around the same time. You started calling her Sarah instead of Miss Matthews." Emma's smile was gentle. "And maybe around the same time, she started looking at our family photos with that mix of sadness and hope in her eyes." The evening sun slanted through the office windows, catching the tickets in a golden glow. On Mike's workbench, his latest innovation sat half-assembled, a new diagnostic tool that could revolutionize how engines were maintained across cultural and technological boundaries. "Singapore's only 14 hours away by direct flight," Emma continued, "and with these innovations you're developing, you'll probably cut that time in half within a year." She stood, moving to the window. "Besides, think how impressive it'll be when I tell my med school interviews that my dad's revolutionizing aviation maintenance across Asia." Mike joined her at the window, watching aircraft take off into the sunset. Each one carried stories, dreams, possibilities. "Your mother would be proud of you, you know. This wisdom you've gained, this strength you've found. She'd be proud of you too, Dad, for being brave enough to consider new horizons." Emma turned to face him. "And I think she'd like Sarah. The way she understands about building things that last, about finding beauty in precision and purpose." Mike looked at his daughter, seeing the young woman she'd become. "When did you start taking care of me instead of the other way around?" "Around the same time, you taught me that the best maintenance isn't about fixing what's broken, it's about recognizing potential and helping it grow." She hugged him fiercely. "Take the job, Dad. Build something amazing. Just promise you'll save me a seat on one of those fancy Matthews international flights when I come to visit." Later, after Emma had left for her evening lab, Mike picked up the tickets again. In their crisp, official surfaces, he saw more than just a career opportunity. He saw a chance to prove that some innovations weren't measured in mechanical precision or engineering specifications, but in the courage to let new possibilities take flight. The Singapore sunrise painted the ultra-modern Matthews International facility in shades of promise. Mike stood in his new office, unpacking his father's toolbox, its weathered surface a stark contrast to the sleek architecture surrounding it. He placed it carefully on the workbench he'd insisted on having installed, right next to the latest diagnostic equipment money could buy. The symbolism wasn't lost on him. Old wisdom meeting new horizons, practical experience joining theoretical innovation. Just like the man himself, standing here halfway around the world from where his journey began. "Making yourself at home?" Sarah's voice carried a warm familiarity that hadn't been diminished by their new professional dynamic. She entered carrying 2 cups of coffee in familiar ceramic mugs, replicas of the ones from their favorite O'Hare coffee shop. "Brought these from Chicago," she said, setting them down. Thought you might want something familiar while you're revolutionizing aviation maintenance across Asia. Mike took his mug gratefully, noting how naturally Sarah had settled into this more personal version of their relationship. The past month had seen them working closely together, preparing for this transition, and somewhere along the way, the careful professional distance had softened into something more comfortable, more real. "The engineering team arrives tomorrow," he said, sipping the coffee, prepared exactly as he liked it, he noticed. "But I wanted to get my bearings first, understand the soul of the place before we start changing it." Sarah moved to the workbench, running her fingers along the edge of his father's toolbox. "That's why you're here, you know. Not just for your technical expertise, but for this understanding that every facility, every operation, has its own rhythm, its own heart." She opened the toolbox carefully, with the respect of someone who understood its significance. Inside, nestled among the well-worn tools, lay a small violin bridge, the one she'd found in the archives months ago. Mike had brought it as a reminder, a connection between his past craft and future innovations. "I had them modify the maintenance bay according to your specifications," Sarah continued. "The local team was skeptical about some of your requirements until I showed them the efficiency numbers from Chicago." Mike smiled, remembering the surprised faces of the Singapore engineers when they'd seen his designs. Sometimes, the best innovation is just finding new ways to apply old wisdom. Speaking of wisdom, Sarah turned to face him, her expression softening. "Emma called this morning. Said to remind you about your weekly video chat and to tell you she aced her organic chemistry midterm." The mention of Emma brought both pride and a slight ache. Karen would have loved seeing her like this, so focused, so sure of her path. "She has that from both her parents," Sarah said quietly. "That ability to see what needs to be done and find the courage to do it." She paused, then added, "Like someone else I know who was brave enough to take on a global challenge." The morning. Light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating them both in its gentle glow. In that moment, the lines between professional and personal, between past and present, seemed to blur into something new and full of possibility. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, moving to stand beside him at the window, "about what you said. About understanding the soul of a place." She gestured to the sprawling facility below. "This operation, everything we're building here, it's not just about maintenance protocols or efficiency metrics. It's about bringing together different approaches, finding harmony in seemingly opposing philosophies." Mike understood what she wasn't saying directly. Just as he was bridging Eastern and Western maintenance techniques, they were navigating their own careful fusion of professional partnership and personal connection. "Sometimes," he said, "the strongest structures are built from combining elements that shouldn't theoretically work together." Sarah's smile held understanding. "Like violin repair techniques and jet engine maintenance, or corporate CEOs and shop floor mechanics, their laughter mingled naturally, filling the office with warmth." Sarah moved toward the door but paused, turning back. "Dinner tonight. I know a place that reminds me of that little Italian restaurant near O'Hare. The owner's daughter is a violinist. Thought you might appreciate that connection." "I'd like that," Mike said, recognizing this for what it was, another careful step in their evolving relationship. Another bridge being built between their worlds. After she left, Mike returned to unpacking his tools, each one finding its place in this new workshop. Through the window, he watched aircraft take off and land, their paths crossing the Singapore sky like threads weaving a new pattern. His father's toolbox sat open on the workbench, its contents gleaming with decades of use and care, ready to help build something new in this place where tradition met innovation. In his pocket, his phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Proud of you, Dad. Mom would be too. P.S. Tell Sarah I expect pictures of this fancy new facility." Mike smiled, feeling the rightness of where he was, who he was becoming. Sometimes the best maintenance isn't just about fixing what's broken, it's about building something stronger, something that carries forward the best of what was while embracing what could be. 6 months into the Singapore operation, Mike stood in the maintenance bay, watching his innovations take physical form. The facility had become a perfect fusion of Eastern precision and Western pragmatism, with his modified tools and techniques now being adopted across the entire Matthews International network. But it was the small gathering in his office that truly marked how far things had come. Sarah had arranged for Emma to fly in for her spring break, surprising Mike with her arrival that morning. Now his daughter stood examining the facility's schematics with the same focused interest she gave to her medical textbooks, while Sarah explained how they'd adapted Mike's Chicago methods for the Asian market. "It's like what Dad always said about understanding systems," Emma observed, tracing the workflow patterns. "Whether it's human anatomy or aircraft maintenance, everything connects." "That's exactly what convinced the board to implement these changes globally," Sarah said, sharing a warm glance with Mike. "Your father's ability to see those connections has transformed how we approach maintenance across 3 continents." The 3 of them moved to the window wall, watching the choreography of aircraft and ground crews below. The sunset painted Singapore's ultra-modern skyline in shades of gold and promise, while in the reflection, Mike could see their 3 figures, standing close, a picture of comfortable familiarity that would have seemed impossible a year ago. "Oh!" Emma suddenly exclaimed, pulling out her phone. "I almost forgot. Look what I found while cleaning out the old apartment." She showed them a photograph, worn at the edges but still clear. Mike in his early days at O'Hare, demonstrating engine repair techniques to a group of young mechanics. "I remember that day," Mike said softly. "Your mother took that picture, said she wanted to capture what it looks like when someone's exactly where they're meant to be." Sarah moved closer, her shoulder brushing his as she studied the photo. "She was right. You have the same expression now when you're teaching the teams here." "Speaking of teams," Emma said, with the careful casualness of someone dropping a practiced hint, "Mom's sister called yesterday. Said she's finally ready to sell the lake house. You know, the one where we used to spend summers." Mike nodded, memories of peaceful weekends and family gatherings washing over him. The lake house had been Karen's favorite place, a retreat where she'd said the world made more sense. "It needs work," Emma continued, "but it's got that amazing workshop space over the boathouse, the one where you used to repair boats and fiddle with engines during rainstorms." Sarah's hand found Mike's, the gesture natural and unplanned. "A workshop overlooking water? Sounds like a perfect place for developing new innovations." "The company's private airfield is only 20 minutes away," Emma added, not even trying to hide her matchmaking now. "And Northwestern's medical school is just an hour's drive." Mike looked between his daughter and Sarah, seeing the conspiracy of care in their shared glances. "You two have already discussed this, haven't you?" "We might have had a few conversations while planning this surprise visit," Sarah admitted, squeezing his hand, "about future possibilities, about creating spaces where different parts of life can come together." Emma moved to hug him, her voice soft but certain. "Mom always said, home isn't just a place. It's where the people you love can build something together." The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Sarah's assistant entered with an update about the next day's board presentation, where Mike would showcase the successful integration of his maintenance innovations across the global network. But even as they turned to discuss business, their hands remained linked, the connection as natural as breathing. Later that evening, after Emma had gone to rest off her jet lag, in the corporate apartment Sarah had arranged, they stood together on the office balcony. The night air carried the mingled scents of tropical flowers and aviation fuel, a combination that somehow perfectly represented their shared world. "The lake house does sound perfect," Sarah said quietly. "A place for family gatherings, for quiet. Innovations, for building new memories while honoring old ones." Mike turned to her, seeing in her eyes the same understanding that had first drawn them together. "You know, Karen used to say that the best homes have workshops attached." Places where broken things can be fixed, where new things can be created. Smart woman, Sarah smiled. She'd be proud of how you've built on that wisdom, how you've taught others to see the poetry in precision, the art in mechanics. She'd like you, Mike said softly. Your understanding of how to build things that last, how to blend the practical with the precious. Sarah's response was to draw him closer, their silhouettes merging against the Singapore skyline. Below them, aircraft moved in their eternal dance of arrival and departure, each one carrying its own cargo of dreams and possibilities. But here, in this moment, two people who had learned to see the beauty in precision and purpose found themselves precisely where they were meant to be. The lake house would need work, but then the best things always did. Like airlines and relationships, like innovations and families, the strongest structures were built carefully, thoughtfully, by people who understood that every lasting thing starts with a single, perfectly executed connection. 1 year to the day after that rain-soaked repair on the Chicago tarmac, Mike stood in the restored workshop above the lake house boathouse. The wrench he'd used that night was now mounted in a simple frame on the wall. Sarah's idea, a reminder of how the smallest moments can change everything. Through the wide windows, autumn painted the lake in shades of gold and crimson, while the private Matthews International Airfield gleamed in the distance. Below, Sarah and Emma sat on the deck, medical textbooks and corporate reports spread between them, their laughter carrying up on the crisp October breeze. The workshop had become everything he'd imagined, part innovation lab, part retreat, part family gathering space. His tools lined the walls with practiced precision, but now they shared space with family photos, engineering awards, and the violin he'd finally started playing again. The room somehow managed to feel both professional and deeply personal, like the life he and Sarah had built together. "Dad," Emma's voice called from below, "your video conference with Singapore starts in 10 minutes. Mike smiled, checking his watch. A gift from Sarah, elegant but sturdy, just like their relationship. The Singapore operation had exceeded all expectations, his maintenance innovations now being studied by aviation programs worldwide. But more importantly, it had shown him that some of the best engineering happens in the heart. He made his way, and down to the deck, where Sarah was reviewing the latest expansion proposals. She looked up as he approached, her eyes carrying that warm gleam that still made his pulse quicken. Ready to revolutionize aviation maintenance on another continent? "Actually," he said, settling into the chair beside her, "I was thinking about something closer to home." He pulled out his notebook. Not the corporate one, but the personal one, where he sketched his most innovative ideas. "Remember that harmonic resonance problem we solved in the Gulf Stream? I've been adapting the principle for medical imaging equipment." Emma leaned forward, her future doctor's mind already engaging with the possibility, like using mechanical harmonics to improve MRI resolution. "Exactly." Mike opened the notebook to his latest sketches. "Your mother always said that understanding one system helps you understand others. These principles of mechanical resonance could revolutionize how we look inside the human body." Sarah's hand found his, their fingers intertwining with practiced ease. "A perfect blend of your expertise and Emma's future profession. Another Collins family innovation." "Matthews Collins," Mike corrected gently, enjoying the way her eyes softened at the name they'd shared for the past 3 months. Their wedding had been small but perfect, held right here by the lake, with Emma as both bridesmaid and best woman. The afternoon sun caught Sarah's wedding ring, a unique design they'd created together, incorporating elements of aircraft-grade titanium with traditional gold, symbolic of their united worlds. On her desk inside, their wedding photo sat beside the old magazine article about her father's cargo operation, past and present in perfect harmony. Emma gathered her books, heading inside to prepare for her evening study group. She'd insisted on keeping her campus apartment, despite the lake house being so close, saying that every good doctor needs to learn independence. But she was here most weekends, filling the house with the energy of youth while pursuing her own dreams of healing and helping. Hard to believe it's been a year, Sarah mused, watching a Matthews International jet draw its perfect arc across the evening sky. From a broken-down Gulf Stream to all of this, Mike followed her gaze, seeing not just the aircraft, but the journey it represented. Your father would be proud, you know, of how you've built his dream into something even bigger. And Karen would love seeing how you've created this new family while honoring her memory, Sarah replied softly. Some people fix machines, some fix bodies, but the really special ones know how to fix hearts. The project updates from Singapore could wait a few minutes, Mike decided. Right now, sitting here with Sarah, watching the sun set over their shared dream, he understood something his father had once told him. The best tools in life aren't the ones in your toolbox, but the ones in your heart. Wisdom, courage, and the ability to recognize love when it appears in unexpected places. Inside the workshop, the framed wrench caught the last rays of sunlight, its worn surface telling a story of skill and serendipity, of two people who discovered that the most important connections aren't made of metal and wire, but of understanding and trust. Like the best engineering solutions, love often comes down to perfect timing, precise alignment, and the courage to believe in possibilities. And sometimes, on a rain-soaked tarmac or in a lakeside workshop, those possibilities take flight in ways that change everything.